making a video today which I'm going to call Haunt Your Web Page. That is, we're going to make some HTML and it's going to include HTML and CSS and JavaScript, and we're going to end up making a web page, a Halloween themed web page with images in it and animations and parts that respond to user input and various things. We've seen some, oh, here goes one. It's the there goes the poltergeist, getting rid of one of the parts of our web page. So in a second, I'm going to switch over to my other pages, and here we go. So we're going to start off with HTML, and the way you know that you've got an HTML web page is that you have a tag surrounded by those little angle brackets, the less than, greater than signs, that say HTML at the start and the end. So we're going to start off with them. And the very first thing that I'm going to do inside the top of them is I'm going to say what language we're making this web page in. EN stands for English. AU is Australian English. Often you see things on the web that say EN US, US English. Most content on the web is made in the US, but this is not. So I'm going to say AU, even though it makes pretty much no difference at all. And inside here, I've got two more elements. So every element in an HTML page has got the angle bracket in front and behind. So I've got two things in there that I've just put in. I've got the head element, which is stuff in the HTML page. Important organisational stuff basically belongs in the head, and the body is mostly the content. And I'm just going to do a little comment there. So that's just to show you how a comment works. A comment is with an angle bracket and an exclamation mark and then a couple of dashes. And I've just put them in there because if this was a long and complicated page, you want to have a few comments in every so often to tell you what you're doing. Oh, and I forgot something right at the top here, which is the doc type declaration. That tells the browser that's going to look at your HTML page that this is HTML. And in HTML5, which I'm using, this is very easy. You just say HTML. In HTML4, it was more complicated. There were various other things that you don't need to know about. But these days, you just say HTML. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do in my head is a meta tag. So this is one of these informational things that says something about the entire web page. Excuse a little out there, that's because I've got a different keyboard on. I've told it that the char set, the character set, is going to be UTF-8, which you pretty much always want to do. You might know about ASCII characters. UTF-8 is basically a full character set that it can cope with all sorts of things like Chinese or Japanese, or even, you know, Spanish might even not fit in the former character set of ASCII. What am I doing first? I'm going to find some text to put in here. And what the hell am I doing, you may ask yourselves. Well, I've gone off to Project Gutenberg, which is a place where it's got various old pieces of text that are in the public domain. And I'm going to get a thing about maths. I'm going to haunt a web page about maths. Why am I going to do this? Well, there's two reasons really. One is because I reckon that if I can make a page about maths spooky, then I can pretty much do anything. So that's one thing. And the other thing is copyright. Most things that are on the web have been made by someone, and someone who has copyright over them, who cares about the content that they've made, who might object to someone using content that they've made. And there's various ways of getting around that. Firstly, you can make sure that stuff you use is allowable to be used and what the conditions are, and we'll get onto one of those in a bit. But a really, really easy way is to get something really old that's out of copyright and use that. So this is from the 19th century. I'm pretty sure we're allowed to. I'm going to put a heading on the top of here. And I have another HTML tag you will now see. This is an H1 tag. There are a bunch of different headings. H1, H2, H3, H4, H5 and H6 are the general heading tags. So H1 is the biggest, generally speaking. When you're making HTML tags, there's loads and loads of HTML tags out there, and here's another one, P, which stands for paragraph. But in fact, when you're making HTML pages, there's only about 6 or 8 of them that are in general use. And during this tutorial, we're pretty much going to go through most of them, I think. So what I'm doing here is I'm surrounding all of the bits of my text with paragraph tags. Why am I doing this, you ask? Because it won't make very much difference at the start, but it's a good organisational thing. And then later on, we're going to be able to tell our web page, do something to a text that is in paragraphs. So it's good if we've got our little indications in here where the paragraphs start and where they end. What am I doing next, I ask myself. I've got all the paragraph tags in, which is nice. I'm just going to look through my text, which I've copied and pasted from somewhere else, because the thing about copying and pasting is sometimes you end up with strange stuff that you don't want. And one thing that I can see, one thing that we often have is strange characters which might look okay in your editor. I'm using Notepad++ here, by the way, which is a free download, which I totally recommend because it's a great editor. And I can just see that in this one, what I have ended up with is a German word that we might want to do something with. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm just going to type in the actual name of my file. So if you see what I'm typing in over here in Google, normally you see HTTP when you're using Google to search for something, but I'm using file. I'm looking for a file on my own computer. So what I'm seeing on the right hand here is actually what I typed in on the left. And there's the U with an umlaut. That's a German character, and it hasn't really come out very well from the PDF where I got it. It's got those little doodle-ackies on the side of the U, which it's not supposed to do. Didn't copy and paste correctly. But I can go back to my document and I can actually put in a little HTML tag, which is, I happen to know the name of it, would be UUML, which will say, instead of just this weird double apostrophe and the U, we're going to put in a proper umlauted U. So a lot of these characters just start with an ampersand, an @ symbol. I think I have lost where it is in the actual document. Where is it in the actual document? There it is. So I'm going to replace that little U with funny marks by an ampersand UUML. There are loads of lists of all of these special characters, and I'm going to put a link to one of them in the web page once I've finished here. But let's just refresh that, and now we see that we've got our little marks over the top of the U completely correctly, which is rather nice. Another thing that often is a problem are apostrophes. Lots of different sorts of documents have things that look like apostrophes but are actually different characters. Microsoft Word is a particularly bad example of something that will just whack in left apostrophes and right apostrophes, but it looks like this is okay at the moment. What am I doing here? Well, okay, we've got our text. Let's start making it look a bit spooky. So I've gone to Google Fonts because I'm looking for a font. And you can look for all sorts of different types of fonts. And I'm going to look for a thin one because thin is spooky. Thick is, cuddly and warm and puppy dogs, and we don't want any of that. This is a nice thin one. I kind of like it. I think I'm going to use this font on my web page. So what I do in Google Fonts, and all of this is completely free, is go in and look at it, and it's going to give me some text to actually put into my web page. But what I've done first is I'm just going to see the page load is how much information the page has to cope with, and how difficult it is for the page to load. And that was actually quite a lot. For one font, getting up into the yellow is kind of bad. We want our page load to be fairly small because that means people with bad connections will still be able to load up our page. So I'm just going to have a little look and see if I can find one that I quite like still that's got better page load. Let's try this one. Let's try Josephine. So now I've got both of them ticked, so that's obviously a lot. But if I take away wire 1, I'm in the green section now. And the other nice thing about Josephine is that whoever's made this font has got lots of different types of font weights. You can have very thin or light or normal all the way down to this bold one. I think I'm going to use light for the moment. And I'm just going to put one font in for the moment. Don't run away with a million fonts because it doesn't really add anything much to your page, and it does add to your page load time, which you don't like. So there's the text down the bottom that Google Fonts has very helpfully told me I need to put into my web page in order to use this font. I'm just going to cut and paste it. So there you go. You can see that it says Josephine Slab is the name of the font. Font weight 300, which means lightish. Up to 800 would be very heavy one. 100's about the lightest it would ever be. So I'm just going to see, well, so when I refresh the page, is that making a difference? No, it's not making a difference just yet, because there's another thing that I need to do. As well as having the information about the font, I actually have to tell the HTML page to use it. And the font is a style. We'll find out more about styles later on, but for now I'm just going to very, very simply say that the whole body of my HTML page, everything in it, is going to be in this font, Josephine Slab. So I'll just write that in there, and when I have done that, I'm going to have to put a quote mark around this because it's got a space in the middle of it, which is a thing to watch out for. And the other thing is that if you've got quote marks inside quote marks, you've got to make sure that the inside one is a different sort. So I've got double quotes around the outside of the word font, and I've got single quotes on the inside, and it still hasn't made a difference. So what have I done wrong? What I'm going to do here at this point, I'm using Chrome, and I'm going to right click in here and go for, you couldn't actually see that in the video, sorry. I did inspect to say inspect what's going on in this element. This is a really, really useful tool. We're going to keep using this a lot. What it says is that font is not the right keyword. I should have used font family. And there, when I do that there, it changes. So now I have to edit that back into my actual document that I'm actually making, because that was just a temporary change. And as soon as I reload on the right-hand side, that would go away unless I save it in my actual document. So if I reload there, now that is all in a slightly different font. Looks a little bit better than our normal sorts of fonts. So we've sort of started to try to style up this web page now that we've got all of our text. And what will I do next, I wonder? I'm just having a bit of a look around here. I'm going to take this close tag for the head down there. So everything inside the open head tag and the close head tag is in the header. What I will do now is I'm going to start making up another bunch of styles. I put a style declaration in the body to say this is a style that I want to use here. But generally speaking, we want to put our styles all together. So this is where I'm going to put them for the moment. They're not going to stay here forever. Eventually they're going to go in a little file by themselves. But just for now, I'm going to make it an actual style that this is our font family, which is called Josephine Slab. And it's going to be for the whole page. So the question is, how do I make that be for the whole page? Oh, and the other thing that I'm doing here, when it says Josephine Slab and then comma sans, what that means is if you can't find that first font, go for sans, that is any old sans serif. And just having a little fallback position like that makes it easier on the web browser to do something sensible if it can't get the actual information from Google Fonts, for instance. What I've just done there is to say that this is the font that should be used for all the HTML. I've got it enclosed in curly brackets, which Notepad++ is doing for me automatically, which is quite nice. And everything within the curly brackets is a declaration of a style to be used in HTML. And now I'm going to do a style for the body. I'm going to say that the background is black. Woo, woohoo, it is black. But the text is also black unless I select it, so that's a bit of a problem. Maybe what I need is to say the colour of the text, and we do this with the keyword colour in American spelling, C-O-L-O-R. So background is black, colour is white. Let's just reload. Woohoo! At last we can see so white on black, that's a bit spookier than the former black on white text. That's not too bad. We can take this style out of here now because the style declaration at the top is telling us to use this font still in the entire document. What I'm going to do now, however, black and white, although more spooky than white and black, is still a bit boring. I'm just going to go back to inspect and just show you, you can use the inspect window to actually change things randomly and sort of see what it looks like, which is quite nice. So we've changed that background to be a different colour. But what I'm going to do at this point actually is I'm going to go off somewhere and see if I can find a colour palette that's made by someone that's a bit less boring even than that, because I'm not necessarily a designy person. I'm going to look and see if someone has made a palette of colours that is spooky. Ooh, and something nasty has just happened. My lovely site Colour Lovers that I like seems to have been hacked. That's bad. So I might just do a little Google search and see if I can find, okay. I did a little cutaway there. I went off and found a palette made by someone who likes design and has seen this as a good palette of colours to do something spooky in. And those colours there are the hexadecimal and RGB values of these various colours that they like. Hexadecimal, if you don't know that, you should probably go off and Google it because it's outside of the scope of this tutorial. But generally speaking, I would do colours in RGB, red, green, blue. And you do it by this declaration, RGB with a bracket, and then so 5 red, 5 green, 5 blue is their definition of a black colour, just a tiny bit lighter than ordinary black. And for the text colour, I'm going to use one of their colours rather than just plain white to see if I can start making it look a little bit better than the sort of design that I would just give it all by myself. So let's go back here. That's still the temporary values. Right, so now what I've got, you can't see that probably very well in the smaller screen if on this video, but that looks a lot nicer. That's just a little bit gentler than having plain old white blaring in your face. And I'm going to use up some of the other colours in this colour palette sooner or later. I've just got little comments up the top to remind me what they are. It's not very readable, so I'm going to make it a bit bigger. I've got another style declaration. So this is a P style declaration. Anything inside a P tag, that is paragraph, is going to become up to 180% size, or maybe I might change that to 160, not quite as big. And you notice that that hasn't changed the heading, because the heading is an H1 tag, not a P tag. And so I can change as much as I like what the things in the paragraphs look like, which is nice, and I can do it without affecting other things in the HTML page. I'm going to give it a little margin around the outside, so 10% on all sides. So you can see if we inspect it, that's actually shorthand for top 10%, right 10%, bottom 10%, left 10%. You can do all of those separately as well. I don't think I can actually edit that in my inspector though. If I take it off, the margins go away, I put them back on again. So I could do all four separately. I could say 10%, 10%, 10%, 10%, 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. And that would put a different margin for each side. I think what I actually want to do, however, is to just do a different one for the top and bottom and for the sides. So if I do that, 2%, 5%, I'm just playing around here. That means top and bottom are going to be 2%, i.e. 2% of the entire document. And, I'm going to do it the other way around. That's right, 5% top and bottom. 5% of the whole document is going to be margin. About 3% left and right. So that means, because I've done it in percentages, which I'm going to do everything in percentages now that I've started. I could also do it in pixels, but that makes things slightly more complicated when you're dealing with different sizes of different people's computers or iPads or phones or whatever they're using. I'm going to do everything in percentages at the moment. So I'm saying that the left and right margin of 3% of whatever the size of the browser happens to be. It'll scale up and down with different browsers. And I'm going to make a border around each paragraph. So since I've got about 7 or 8 paragraphs, I should have a number of little borders coming up, and I'm going to make them yellow, which is one of the colours that I got out of my little Colour Lovers palette here. You can see it in here. Border colour, yellow, looks okay, but it's not coming up in the screen yet because I haven't told it how to draw the border. I've just told it what colour it will be in. So I'm going to say 6 pixels width. I'm not doing that in percents because it's so small. I don't really want it to change when I resize. And it's still not showing up because the last thing I have to tell it is what sort of border it should be. I'm going to say it's a solid style border for the moment. And then I'll just refresh this and see. Ooh, that is yellow. That is very yellow. That is not a spooky sort of yellow. So I'm going to have to do something with that. And one thing that is fairly easy to do, sorry, wrong RGB, is change my RGB here into RGBA. A stands for alpha. That is the amount of transparency or opacity. And I'm going to make it half. So suddenly I've made this yellow half transparent, which looks a lot nicer. And I think I'm going to change the style as well. I'm going to make it a grooved border, which looks a little bit fancier. So what that does is it automatically puts in a slightly darker colour there in the top left, and then down the bottom right corner it does it at the top. So that's okay, but the letters are awfully close to the border here. I had my margin. The margin goes outside the text, outside the P element. What I really want to do is have a little border inside, which is called padding. So I've made my padding there 1% of the width of the box. And that's okay, that just gets it off the side a little bit. And now that I've got an element that I'm doing stuff to, I can also make a different colour for the background of this this paragraph element. And so what am I going to do there? I think I'm going to get the light green, no, the dark green. I'll get the dark green and make the background just of this paragraph element and every paragraph element green. So now I've got a lot of different colours. I quite like that. It's a little bit more interesting than just the white and the black, but because I got the palette from someone who actually knows something about colours and design, it looks better than what I would do by myself. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to start working with images. I'm going to start making it look a bit more interesting. I'm going to look for a picture that I can use. So usage rights, we're back to copyright again. Labelled for reuse with modification. What does that mean? I'm not just going to grab any old image off the World Wide Web. I'm going to go for one that I am allowed to use. And this is one that I found. It's called Creepy Landscape. I rather like it. It goes with the colours that I chose. And so I'm going to use that one. So there's a couple of different ways that you can use images. That is, some people would allow you to just use them, whatever. Some people will allow you to use them, but they want to be credited, which is in fact what this person has said when I look at the details of this picture. I've downloaded it already. What I'm going to do is, for the moment, I'm just going to put in the URL in the background and have that as my background. No repeat, I just want to have one of them. Later on, I'm going to do some stuff about crediting the person who made that image that I'm going to use. But for the moment, I'll just put that. So let's see the whole of the page. So the background is there up the top, and there is the whole page. So it is not repeating, it's just there once. And what else am I going to put in? Yes, the size. What size am I going to make it? I could make it 100 pixels smaller, so that's tiny. Definitely don't want to do that. My size of my web page is on a normal computer likely to be in thousands, so I could say 100%. That means the size of the whole web browser. And you can't really see this very well in the video, but basically I'm actually making that bigger and smaller. In the video it just looks like I'm sort of stretching out the inside of it, but what I'm actually doing on my screen is making it bigger, and the picture is resizing to fit that. There's also another instruction that I might decide to use instead, which is cover. And what that's doing is it's making sure that every bit of my page has some of the image in it. And since my page is long and the image is wide, what this means is we're going to lose the right-hand side of it mostly. But in return for that, when we go right down to the bottom, we have still got some of the image. So the disadvantage of that in this particular case is that when I make it a really long, thin shape, it is getting a little bit blocky. That's not too bad for a background image, so I might leave it like that at the moment. Now that I've got a background image up, I might change the background colour inside the actual paragraph element back to black, because I think that looks better. And the other thing that I probably should note at this point, you notice how I've been able to change the background colour of the paragraph box independently of the outside. So this is where style sheets are rather nice. They're what's known as cascading style sheets. When HTML is looking for a style, for a paragraph for instance, it'll first look at the styles for P, the paragraph, and then it'll look for styles on body because the paragraph is inside the body, and it will go on looking up and up to the top for styles to put there. What am I doing at the bottom here? I'm using another different HTML tag. This is the div tag. Div does absolutely nothing except act as a placeholder for some stuff that you might want to do in CSS. I'm creating a new div and I'm going to call it a credit div, and inside it I'm going to put all of the information from where I got that image file originally. I got it from Wikimedia Commons, which is a nice place to get images from, and the person has told me here, you must attribute the work in a manner specified by the author. So he wants to be credited for his work, which is fair enough. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to put a little tag down the bottom of the page that says what file we have used, where we got it from, what the name of the person was who owns the content of that file. So that is a good thing to do. This person has created content which has been useful to us, and they deserve credit for their work. So all of this means is I've just got a little credit note down the bottom saying who the background was created by. And the reason why I have said I've put it in a div element is that later on we're going to actually use, oh actually no, right now, we're going to say some styles for that div element. So the way that we do that, dot credit, which means any element that has the class credit. So I said that my element was a div element and that its class was called credit. So I'm going to create some styles for that. Dot means what's coming up is a class name. And then the next little instruction that I've got there, when it says dot credit space a, that means any a tag, that is any link, that's inside something of class credit should have this style, which in this case is decoration none. That is, take away the underline. The underline is a decoration. Don't want that. Don't like it. Want the stuff that's a link to actually look the same. So the other thing that I'm going to do to make it look the same as the tag it's inside is I'm going to say that the colour is inherit. That means the colour is whatever the colour was of the tag that is surrounding you, which was this light greeny colour. So I've said now that any a tag that is inside an element whose class is credit should have those characteristics. Another way of identifying different tags when you want to put different styles on them is by ID. So tags can either have a class or they can have an ID. Class is generally used when you might have a lot of different tags that you want to do the same thing with. ID, there's only supposed to be one. So when I say ID equals iCanvas, and this is the way that we create a style for something with an ID, it's with a hash rather than with a dot. So I've told it that that particular paragraph has the ID iCanvas, and when something has the ID iCanvas, I'm going to put my little picture that I have got and saved previously of some cat's eyes. And it just so happens that the person who created this one did not ask for credit, so I'm not going to bother with that down the bottom, though I could if I wanted to. So now that paragraph has got a background image of its own, which is this image of cat's eyes. We've got a lot of cat's eyes there because the image itself is quite small. So let's fix that up to make the size a bit bigger. We'll say it's 100% of the width of the element. And if I refresh that, now the cat's eye image is going all the way from left to right, the whole way across the element. That's great. Until I do this, and we discover that because it's a not very tall image, when I make it short and fat, it repeats. We don't want it to repeat. Definitely don't want that. So now I've said it's 100% of the width and 100% of the height. So now when I do that, resize my web browser, it stretches out the image till the image is taking up all of the element, which is what I wanted. Last thing that I'm going to do here, I'm going to cut all of those styles and I'm going to put them into a file of their own. This is what's usually done with styles. You put them into a .css file. And the reason is that what's meant to happen with HTML pages, in order to organise them right, you should have your .html file with all the content in it and your .css file with all the styles, all the things that make it look in a particular way. So that's what I'm doing here. I don't need the angle bracket style and end style tags. It just will be saved, which I'll call something, I'll give it some name of a .css file. I am actually doing that, but you can't see it in the video because of the way I've set up this video. Call it style.css, which is a good name for a style sheet. Now what I have to do is to actually tell my main HTML file to use those styles, which I'm going to do with another reference up here in the head of the document, where we put all of our organisational information. I'm going to say we need to use a style sheet, and the reference of it is style.css. If it was in a different directory, then I'd have to put some more stuff about what directory it was in, but I've put it in the same directory as my HTML file because that just makes life so much easier. And then when I do that, if I refresh my web browser, nothing looks different, which is good. But over here, you can see that the web page does know where it's getting the style from. So that's kind of useful as well, because when you look at HTML that you're unfamiliar with and you wonder why it looks a particular way, why the styles are doing what they're doing, then that can take you directly to the actual style sheet, so you can examine the right style sheet to see what's going on. Very important if you have more than one style sheet, which today we're not going to, because we're just doing something fairly simple. So there you are, we have started on our web page, and it's got HTML and CSS, and then in the next video I'm going to start doing some moving things in it. So we're going to have some things floating about, we're going to have our elements moving about, we're going to do different things that can be done with CSS animation and with JavaScript, and I hope that you'll come back for that. Bye!